Valerie Wafer served as Rotary International Vice President in 2021-2022. She was a Rotary International Director from 2020 to 2022 and is current co-chair of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Advisory Council. Please welcome Rotarian Valerie Wafer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the distinct honor to introduce a really great Rotarian and a wonderful friend. You're going to really enjoy listening to Brian Rusch. And Brian got his start in Rotary as a youth exchange student, which is so exciting for this district. I know our youth exchange students will relate, and I know many of you have that experience as well. And Brian went to Brazil, and we always have a hard time converting some of our alumni into Rotary, but Brian is a great example of the person who benefited from Rotary and now gives back to Rotary in such an amazing way. He joined Rotary in his 20s, so soon after coming back from that exchange, and he joined the Rotary Club of Hollywood, California, USA, and he helped charter San Francisco Castro Rotary, which was Rotary's first LGBTQ plus cultured club. Yes, that deserves a round. And Brian and I work very closely on the Rotary International Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion work. I'm honored to be the chair, and he's been the vice chair since the inception of this great work we do. Now, professionally, Brian strategizes with nonprofits, governments, corporations, and celebrities to help optimize their platforms to be change makers for good. He's run organizations for both Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, taking the knowledge they have imparted on him to create programs for youth to inspire their own exploration of ethics and to reshape conversations on peace, equality, and forgiveness. Currently, Brian is the CEO of Out for Equality, a US-based nonprofit that provides strategy and resources to grassroots LGBTQ plus organizations fighting for human rights around the world. So please welcome my friend, Brian Rusch.
Hey, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Valerie. I don't know if you guys know how lucky you are to have Valerie Wafer in your district. She does so much for Rotary, and it's just amazing to consider her a friend and that you have her here. You know, I get invited a lot to talk to these things, and I realize that it's got quite a bit to do with the people that I've worked with and the people that I know, and so I wanted to share a little bit to start with about my work with the Dalai Lama. I worked on a project, it was about 2009, and it was a film that we did called Project Happiness. And over the course of the year, we had students in Nigeria and students in the Tibetan Children's Village in India and students from California dialogue about what happiness is, how you can find it, what you can do in your life to really achieve true happiness. And we had them speak with experts and different luminaries. They spoke to George Lucas and they spoke to Richie Davidson, who's a noted neuroscience, about how to achieve happiness. And at the end of that year, we took them all to meet the Dalai Lama. And so they're all sitting in this large room, and the Dalai Lama's sitting there, and they're asking all sorts of different questions. And finally, one of the students stops, and he's like, "Your Holiness, how do you find lasting happiness?" And then he's like, "And how do I find lasting happiness?" Dalai Lama looks around the room at all the students, and then he looks at the young man, and he's like, "You know, for you, I don't know." And he starts laughing. And then he's like, "You know, I can tell you how I find happiness, and I can give you the skills for how to find happiness, but I can't tell you how you can find happiness. Only you can find that." And DEI is a lot like this when we're talking about it. When we talk about DEI, Valerie and I can give you tips and tools and skills and resources that you can use, but we don't know your clubs. We don't know the people that you're interacting with. We don't know the people that really are going to transform your clubs into healthy, prosperous clubs. And so only you can do that for yourself. So what we really encourage you to do is to look at that and look at what you can do to expand that. When I talk about DEI, one of the things that I find, because sometimes, especially in the US, we get a little pushback about it, and I find that the easiest thing to do is talk about money. So the website ZipRecruiter says that the median income in San Francisco is $80,000 US per year. Here in Toronto, it's about 60,000 Canadian or about a little less than 45,000 US per year. In Delhi, the median income is $3,000 per year. And in Lagos, Nigeria, the median income is $900 per year. Now, does anyone here know how much we pay in Rotary International dues in Canada? Just for RI dues, does anybody know what it costs per year? It's about $75 US. It's the same amount in California, the same amount in Lagos, it's the same amount in Delhi. That means that no matter where you live in the world, and no matter what the median income is, we're paying the same amount of money for Rotary dues. Now, that all but guarantees that in certain regions of the world, only the wealthiest people can be in Rotary. And that's problematic because it's not fair to all concerned. It's not creating an opportunity for everybody in that community who is willing and able to be able to contribute to that community and to be able to do something to that community to participate because they simply cannot afford it. You know, I chartered a club during the pandemic called the Rotary Club for Global Action. It's an e-club based in District 5150, which is the San Francisco Bay Area. And my idea was that, you know, for me, Rotary has always been about community. And my community was a global community. So what if I was able to find people from all over the world and bring them together in a global e-club, which is what I did. And now today we have 40 members from 32 different countries. And one of the things that when we started working together is that I wanted to remove obstacles to people being able to be in Rotary. Some of those obstacles were like, for example, in the Middle East, we have a member from Dubai who can't join the men's only club that they have there. A lot of them were that, like, for young people in certain regions of the world, India, for example, you can't join Rotary until you're a certain age. A lot of it was financial, that people just couldn't afford to be in Rotary unless they had a certain amount of money. And then actually, and I'm very proud about this, we have the very first member living in Cuba since Rotary pulled out of Cuba in 1979. And so it was through this and how we can look at different ways to form clubs that we're able to start creating new opportunities for people. And during the pandemic, we were able to install hand washing stations in all 4 of the major schools in the Masai Mara in Kenya. Also in Kenya, we provided menstrual kits to over 700 girls, reusable ones, so that they could attend school and wouldn't have to stay home during their periods. Each month during the pandemic, our club delivered 4,000 kilos of food per month to the homeless population in Delhi. We provided vocational finance and training assistance to entrepreneurs in Nigeria, and we helped provide enough syringes to vaccinate the entire population of Cuba. Now, do I say all this just to brag about my club? Absolutely, because I'm super proud of it. But I also say this because every single one of these projects was led by one of our sponsored members, which is something that we've done in our club. We realized that, you know what, sometimes people can't afford to be in Rotary. What if we created sponsorship opportunities? So our dues are about $250 US per year. And we have members that, you know, for example, we have a member in India who, she only makes about $150 US per month. She can't afford to be it. But she's a thriving member of our club, and she's the one that spearheaded this delivery of food to the homeless population there. And in addition to that, she was the recipient of the People of Action Award, Champions of Inclusion, 2 years ago. This is somebody who wouldn't be able to be in Rotary if we hadn't created these opportunities. And it's important to say that this sponsorship opportunity is something that we offer, no questions asked. If you go to the treasurer or to the president and you say, I cannot afford dues this year, we cover it. And it's been fortunate when we started it, we reached out to a lot of past district governors and we're like, hey, I have this idea to do this. Could you sponsor a member? And it was amazing because one of the things that Rotarians love to do is bring more people into Rotary. And so people are happy to help support this effort. And in addition to that, you know, I get to speak a lot. I get a lot of opportunities to do that, and I don't charge to speak. But when people do ask me, hey, is there something that we could offer you? I'm like, make a donation to my club so we can help sponsor these members. And again, it's something that is just an incremental way that we can make a huge difference in growing Rotary and helping to create more diversity within our clubs. So not too long ago, I was working for a nonprofit organization that focused on fighting human trafficking. And Pope Francis has invited us to work on a project documenting the work of the Talitha Kum, which is a group of nuns in all over the world. And what they really do is they focus on helping refugees and victims of trafficking, mostly sexual trafficking. Now, when I took this position, I was told by people that were involved, one of the people, my boss, not to act too gay. So first of all, I'm not acting. I'm literally this gay. And the second thing is that what exactly is too gay? Like, how do I figure that out? What am I, like, is there just like, okay, I can not have my hand up too high or when I'm dancing? Or I don't know what it was. But the reality is I didn't really know, but I decided that it was important that we work on this project with the Vatican because we were able to have a huge impact. And so I decided to kind of like maybe tone down who I was as a person a little bit. And I felt like it was the best thing to do. And I was wrong. Because I realized that as I was doing that, I was really not opening myself up to the complete experience of what we were doing and able to work with people. And I even had somebody ask me once, we were in Rome, and I remember this distinctly, and he's like, you know, there's something about you, there's just like these layers of the onion, and we need to peel back a layer because there's something about you that's just put off from the rest of us. And I realized I shouldn't be in a space like this. And so I quit this job, and I felt really great about leaving it, but I was like worried because I'm like, okay, maybe I'll never have the opportunity to do that. In 2020, Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi reached out to me, and he really had this dream to bring together faith leaders from around the world to really call on the governments of the world to basically set aside a portion of the income that is going to fight COVID to help elevate people in extreme poverty so that we could really help put an end to child labor and human slavery in a lot of these countries that it really increased while we were during the middle of the pandemic, because while many of us were locked away in our homes and getting deliveries from Amazon, people in the global south were actually having to work more, and they were dying at astronomical rates, and so it really was something that we wanted to do. And so it was interesting because suddenly I'm faced with working with all these faith leaders from around the world, Sheikh Bashir and members from the Anglican Church and different rabbis and the Dalai Lama and different Buddhist leaders, and the Vatican and Pope Francis. And at that point, some of you who've known me for a while, I had pink hair and I was just like, I'm living my life in quarantine and I'm gonna enjoy it. And there wasn't a single person who had a problem with it. And since then, I've continued to move forward and do work with the Vatican, and they have not had a single problem with my sexuality. The Pope knows I'm gay. I've met the Pope a couple times, and it was never, ever a problem. And so I think that it's like, what I realized from that is that I needed to start arriving as my authentic self and really doing what I can, because it's important, because it not only feels good for myself, but I feel like it also opens up opportunities for people around the world to see that, like, we don't all fit into one box, and we don't all have to. We can do different things around the world and still have a huge impact while being our authentic selves. And I thought a little bit more about this. What does it mean to be too gay? And I realized what it meant was, don't be too feminine. Don't be too ladylike. Don't act too much like a woman. And it was really just code for you need to be more masculine. And now here's the thing. There's nothing inherently wrong with masculine traits, feminine traits. They shouldn't be compared with each other because none is better than the other. But I think that for many of us, masculinity has been the default rather than a choice. And I feel like that it really is limiting to many men in who we can be professionally and personally. I also think for many women, it creates this unrealistic expectation of how to get forward in the world. I think that a lot of women, when they start getting into the professional space, they are expected to take on masculine traits to ascend into senior leadership positions. And so I think about this, and I'm like, what if, instead of expecting women to be more masculine, what if some of us men started being a little bit more ladylike? What would our organization look like? What would our world look like if we allowed ourselves to be more vulnerable and more compassionate, to take on traits that sometimes were stereotypically more feminine? I think we're all I know that especially here in Canada, we're all super proud of past President Jennifer Jones. She was the first woman in our organization to lead our organization in 118 years. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, they ask, why did this take so long? So somebody mentioned Sylvia Whitlock earlier, who was the first female president of a Rotary Club. What many of you probably know, some of you may not, was the reason she was the first is because her club sued Rotary International and took them to the US Supreme Court, and they won. And that is how she became the first female president. She was part of that lawsuit that sued the US government, or sued Rotary International to allow women into Rotary. And it was her, and at first it was just in the US. It took a Council on Legislation change a couple years later to allow it globally. And I think that so for a long time, our pathway to leadership blocked women from actually taking senior positions. And it's something that's really interesting because it's only now in the last maybe decade or so have women gone through the steps of being district governor, or assistant governor, district governor, director, and where they could actually be in a position to be president. And even then, when I've known Jennifer for a very long time, and I would see her and she wouldn't talk about it. She wouldn't talk about being the first woman very often. And I could see that she had to kind of straddle this line of being feminine but not too feminine. God forbid she couldn't be sexy. There was definitely an expectation that she had to sort of fit into this box to not be threatening to men and also still be female. And it was during her year, as she took on that role of president, that you started to see her kind of evolve into her authentic self. She started going around the world and she started speaking with people, and people would start saying thank you. That women would come up to her and thank her, but people from other minority groups would come up to her. People from the Black community, people from the LGBTQ community, people would come. They were so inspired that they were able to see a change in the organization and senior leaderships. And it's it's one of the things when I finally knew that Jennifer was starting to sort of embrace her femininity fully as a leader, is I got this call in, I think it was probably February of her year, and she's like, oh my God, I'm gonna meet the king, what do I wear? And for those of you who don't know, I used to be a fashion stylist, so I used to dress people professionally. And my first answer was well, which king? And she's like, King Charles, I'm gonna meet him and I don't know what to wear. And I'm like, calm down. And so, I sat there and 5 minutes later, I'm like, here's the dress that you should wear. And it is the dress that she ended up wearing. And so the reason I tell this story is why do I tell this story? It's because all of you really need a gay best friend when you really reach those leaderships. No, the reason I tell it is because it really does, you do start to reach a point where you do have to start being your authentic self. And this was something that Jennifer truly cared about, but she didn't want people to know that she cared about it. And so it wasn't until she was able to start really becoming her authentic self fully in that position that people really started to connect even on a greater level with her than they ever did before. And there's a part of that story about Jennifer being the first female president that doesn't get told a lot, and that's that Nick was the first gentleman of Rotary International. And being the first husband, I have a lot of admiration for Nick because it takes a certain kind of man who is willing to put his career aside and step back and be the support system for a very powerful, strong woman. And I think that it was such an inspiration for many of us to be able to see this and to be able to say, oh, there are so many different ways that we can do that. And while we talk about these leaders that are really breaking new grounds, I think it's really important to talk about our current president, Stephanie. We don't talk about this often, but Stephanie is the very first single person to ever be elected to the position of Rotary International president. And that is a huge deal. All of these new types of leaders are important because they are showing us that there is no longer one way to be the leader of our organization. That there are many different paths, and you don't have to fit into a box of a certain type of person to lead the organization. And it's important because we're evolving as an organization, but we need to continue that evolution. Very few people, and very few of the presidents that we have had in the 120 years now of Rotary International have been people of color. We have only had one black president in the entire history of our organization. But it is women and the diversity of races and cultures and beliefs and abilities and ages and even the recognition of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. That is exactly what is keeping Rotary relevant in the future. It is what is going to keep us a successful organization that we will continue to be for years and years to come. And it is critical that all of us that do not fit the stereotypical idea of what a Rotarian is, it is absolutely necessary that we remain steadfast in who we are. An important part of how culture evolves is through visibility. And when you're able to see people on stage who are very different from you, who are able to reach out and be a representation of a different affinity group, that is when you are able to inspire new generations of people to get involved with our great organization. Diversity has always been one of our core values, but it's only recently that as an organization, we have really started to prioritize it. I'm thrilled today. Thank you again, DG Sohail, for inviting me to come here. Because this is a DEI district conference, and that is so fantastic. This is only the second DEI district conference that I've ever had the opportunity to participate in. And interestingly enough, neither of them were in the US. But you'll find that Rotary International's commitment to DEI is unmatched by organizations that are of similar size. With our code of conduct, our renewed statement on DEI, and the many educational opportunities at the Learning Center, we are showing our members and the world that Rotary is an inclusive organization. But DEI is not something that we're just going to work on and then we'll finish it. It is going to be something that needs to be ingrained as part of our total culture. It is something that we need to honestly assess where we are as an organization globally, just in our districts, in our zones, and in our clubs. And then we have to look at what we can do to improve these things. In 2023, I was on my way to the other district conference on DEI in Portugal, and I got a phone call from then director Drew Kessler. And Drew was like, Brian, I know you do a lot with LGBT groups around the world. We have a Rotaractor in Uganda who's reached out to us because he's being hunted. And at the time, this was in May of 23, and the government of Uganda had just passed this draconian law that criminalizes it to be LGBTQ. And the punishment is either life in prison or death. And so he was terrified, and he's like, is there anything you can do? And I'm like, well, let me try and see if there's something and what we can do. And so one of my club members is a human rights attorney at the United Nations in Geneva, and I called Claire, and I was like, hey, Claire, this is the situation. Do you know anybody in Uganda? Because I haven't been doing much work there. She's like, let me see. I boarded my plane, flew to Porto, and when I got off the plane, I had a message from Claire, and she's like, he's safe. But the thing was we couldn't end there because he was safe for the moment. And we were like, okay, we've got our Rotaract brothers who are being hunted for who they are. And it's terrifying. And we have to do more to help them. So I do quite a bit of work in South Africa, and I reached out to Rotary members that I know there, and I had an amazing response from the Rotaractors in Cape Town. And they're like, whatever you need, we'll make it happen. I was able to speak to another one of my club members who was also in Cape Town, and I'm like, hey, could you invite this person to be a speaker? He had a big event coming up so that we can get him a special visa to do that. And after about 6 months, we were able to get him out of Kampala and into Cape Town, and he was safe. But it was interesting because, last year we talked a lot about mental health, and I got a call about a week after we got this Rotaractor safe to Cape Town, and he's like, is it okay if I go outside? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Why wouldn't it be okay? And I realized he had been living in such a state of survival mode for so long that he hadn't been able to turn that off. And so the other piece that we had to do, even though we had been able to get him a safe place when he first reached out to us, and we were able to relocate him to a safe place in South Africa, our job wasn't done. We needed to start looking at what he had been going through and make sure that he had the resources through therapists and through other people that he could talk to be able to deal with the trauma that he had been facing. And while I always tell this story about this particular Rotaractor, this is important with a lot of projects that we do, because so often when there's a major earthquake, we had the huge hurricane in southern US this last week, people jump to help immediately. We'll get you clothing, we'll rebuild your house, we'll do that. But we aren't looking at the mental health of what people have gone through. My mother lost her house in a fire a couple years ago, in a giant forest fire. And for a year, she was just not functioning properly because she was so traumatized by the experience. And so I think that I encourage all of you, while we start to really focus on what we can do with our projects, let's look at that next step, that we are making sure that we aren't just helping people with their immediate needs, but that we're helping them with their long-term needs. And part of that is mental health, and that we do something to really address that and help them be able to thrive in the society. Now, I'm really happy to report that this Rotaractor that we relocated to South Africa, he is doing amazing. He is now working for me. Thank you. He joined the Rotary Club of Waterfront, which is a Rotary Club right on the coast of Cape Town. He also started a Rotaract Club based on our Rotary Club, which is made up of Rotaractors from different countries around the world, and based in Uganda, actually. And he's been working with a group called Peace Jam, which works with Nobel Peace Laureates to bring them here and kind of inspire the next generation of peace leaders. And he's been acting as a mentor to young people in hard areas, or in the townships of Cape Town, to really help them and give back to them as a therapist and a counselor, and what he's been able to share his expertise. Now all of this is the power of Rotary in action. This is precisely why we need to be more vigilant about DEI. DEI is about more than making sure that we have diverse membership. It's about making sure that we protect the human rights of all members in our Rotary family. And while Rotary's DEI is about more than membership, it's important to remember it is also about membership. As we work to make our clubs more diverse, people often ask, well, how do we get more young people, people of color, LGBTQ members? How do we get those people involved in Rotary? And the first thing that I want to tell you is don't tick boxes. Don't say, okay, great, we've got a deaf guy, tick, and we've got a young man, tick, and we've got a black lesbian, tick, tick, tick. I discovered the best way that we can encourage diversity is through partnerships and projects. Does your region have a large ethnic minority population who's underrepresented in your clubs? I have found in many, I live part-time in Spain in the Spanish clubs. They tend to be all of a certain class and age and type of person, and yet they're not representing the entire community. So I encourage them, and I encourage all of you, go out and collaborate on projects with them. Show them why they want to be part of your club. Don't just tell them, hey, you should be part of my club. Show them what it is that makes your club exciting and the amazing things that you're doing in the community so that they want to be part of that. And you can invite disability rights activists or representatives and other organizations to be speakers at your club so that your club can learn more about that. And that will also, while bridging that gap, encourage other people to want to know more about what you're doing. Now, I talk a lot about authenticity when I talk to people, and I have to admit that authenticity is a lot easier when you have privilege. Now, when I was born queer, that put me in a marginalized group. But I also carry cis male and white-bodied privilege. I know the Pope and I know Britney Spears, so for some reason you all give me a platform to speak. But the reality is if I was a 20-year-old gay black Rotaractor in Kenya, I would not have that opportunity to speak. I would not be invited to travel across the world and talk to a district conference in Canada or Portugal or wherever it is that I happen to be going. So I need to use that privilege to be an upstander. When I see something that isn't right, I need to stand up and say something. Every one of us has some sort of privilege, especially in this room. But many of us have a lot of privilege. And we need to use this privilege to start upstanding for others that don't. I know that I've had a lot of amazing experiences that might seem unique, but they're really not. I hope that as we go out there into the world, that you realize that you really need to be an ally to others, but also you need to arrive 100% as your authentic self. We live in a beautifully diverse world, and we need to work together to value the diversity of the human experience so that every single one of us can achieve our own visions of success and prosperity. As all of us move forward to create our own personal legacies, let's do so by remaining authentically ourselves, and let's be allies to everyone else that's showing up authentically themselves. One of my favorite quotes is by my old boss, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." We have an opportunity. We can be that light in the darkness. When we work to make the world a better place for others, it also makes a better place for us. We're all in this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much coming, Brian. It's great to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all those things.
Thank you for opening the conversation.
It's a good idea to open the conversation in the district, and I'm really thankful to you to come and talk to us about that. Okay.
Thank you.
That's very.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.